With this brand new Yu-Gi-Oh Master Duel set, the Tier 0 format is now over. Malice, while still a Tier 1 deck, steps aside as Ryzeal takes its place as top dog in the Yu-Gi-Oh Master Duel metagame. But while the deck is deemed healthier by many players like myself, it can still be very powerful and frustrating to play against. So knowing how to play against it, what its strengths are, its weaknesses, and all that is incredibly important as you adapt to the new Yu-Gi-Oh metagame. So in this video, I'm going to be telling you guys all about Ryzeal, how you're looking to beat it, and what to look out for as you're disrupting their plays. Before we get into a deep dive of the Ryzeal archetype, let me know if you guys enjoy this type of discussion content. If it's worth every time a new meta-breaking set comes out, discussing the ins and outs of the archetype so that players have a good idea of how to handle it. I'm always looking to grow and improve the channel, so feedback is appreciated. We are close to 100,000 subscribers, so please subscribe if you haven't already and smash the like button. Now with that said, let's continue looking at Ryzeal. So for those of you who are less familiar with Ryzeal, it is a rank 4 deck, and it cannot do much else because most cards, after they're used, will lock you into rank 4s for the rest of the turn. They can summon themselves pretty easily from the hand, as well as get bonus effects on summon, with Ext and Sword giving you searches, Ice special summoning from the deck, Star setting one from the deck, and Node special summoning one from the graveyard. This collection of monsters gives you a large amount of level 4s to work with to summon rank 4s, including Ryzeal's own 2 rank 4s, which are both incredible. Duo Drive, which can search 2 cards, as well as Detonator, the star of the deck. And this card is going to be integral to surviving in this format. Knowing how to operate against it is important. Yeah, it's a powerful card. It is a 3000 attack rank 4 requiring 2 monsters at least, which on summon will attach another material to it from the graveyard, and it can be anything, not just the Ryzeal. And then furthermore, when your opponent activates a card or effect, you can attach material to target a card in the field and destroy it. Importantly, this effect is not once per turn, so it's essentially a Zodiac Trident-esque effect, albeit it's not as proactive, but is not limited to just once per turn. Furthermore, if an Exceed monster, including itself, would be destroyed, you can attach material from it. That effect, however, is for some reason the once per turn effect. The last really important piece to Ryzeal you have to understand is Ryzeal Cross, the field spell. It can once per turn target 2 Ryzeal cards in your grave, throw them in the bottom of the deck to draw a new card. Furthermore, when a monster effect is used by your opponent, when it's resolving, you can detach material from a Ryzeal card to negate its effect. So that means your opponent won't know if it's negated until the chain's already in process of resolving, which can complicate ways of playing around and dealing with this card. That's going to be a broad overview of the Ryzeal deck. It has access to all sorts of rank 4s as well, and we'll talk about in a second how that impacts your ability to play around things. Ryzeal is a big reason why Abyss Dweller was banned in OCG and TCG, and we see in Master Duel it was preemptively banned with the release of Ryzeal, likely for this reason. But other rank 4s are still very good, so even with Abyss Dweller gone, this deck is not to be underestimated. While all the cards are powerful to some degree, there's 3 things I'm looking out for that I'm making sure I'm prepared for. The first of which is Ext Ryzeal. It was just one of the smaller generic names, but it's arguably one of the best cards I've ever seen in Yu-Gi-Oh! It's truly spectacular. It's a level 4 Pyro, so you can search off Bonfire, that can summon itself from the hand by sending an XYZ from your Ext deck to the graveyard. Your instinct is to send maybe a Ryzeal to attach off a Duo Drive, but you can send any XYZ. So you can send something with a graveyard effect. But then when it's summoned, if all monsters you control are level 4 or rank 4s, you can search then a Fire Thunder Ryzeal from your hand. So it keeps cycling, as is the nature of this deck. But the important thing here is it can summon itself and then send an XYZ. And the XYZ you're looking to send at the moment is Meteorological Aggregator. Aggregator, when it goes to the graveyard, and that's all that matters with the effect, is you can target a card on the field and negate its effect. So what Ext allows you to do is almost unconditionally, because you don't care about locking yourself out of 4s in this deck, summon it with no setup, get a search which threatens something, and then also negate a card on field, which when breaking through fields is monumental. It takes the idea of premium extender to the next level. Because when we look at decks and cards put in a deck as extenders go, I've always been kind of talking about you're looking for something called a premium extender, so something that doesn't just summon itself, but does something else as well. So either helps you break through a field or generates more advantage to keep playing through disruptions. And Ext does the search and the board breaking part. It's truly one of the best cards in the game. And it's the reason decks like Runic will struggle, because put up a Floodgate or a Runic Fountain and turn it off immediately with Aggregator. And yeah, it targets any card, not just monsters. So it's really hard for many decks to cope with it. So when you're building your end field against Ryzeal, or even just blindly in the metagame, or preparing your deck, make sure you're very conscious that this could be the first action happening in a turn. Because if your first interaction or your board is weak to your opponent just going Bonfire Ext, or Summon Ext, or 7 Tachyon for Ext, and that makes you lose the game, then your game plan doesn't work. You need to think of something else. Untargetable cards can be pretty good. So Fiends with Desiree, for example, is one that feels solid because even if you negate the sequence, you now need one more target effect to actually deal with the Ext Ryzeal. Whereas a card like Caesar, if you're going for Fiendsmith combos, is literally useless because it will immediately just get negated by the aggregator. You can't interact with Ext because it doesn't start a chain to summon itself, and your Ryzeal opponent just continues to play free. Now, it's important to note that there are other XYZs that aren't yet out in Master Duel that have a graveyard effect, and it's very important we did not get these cards right now because they do impact how Ryzeal will go about. The first one of which is Eclipse Twins. This card is truly spectacular, and definitely Konami made this card with Ryzeal in mind. It seems that in order to power balance a little bit, Master Duel has opted to leave it out of the game for the time being. It's a rank 4, but can also be made by using rank 4s as material. It can attack twice by attaching materials, but importantly, when it goes to graveyard, and this doesn't matter where from, you target 2 rank 4s in your grave, except itself, and you summon one and attach the other to it as material. Now, this is important because when you go first, sending Aggregator off of X isn't that impactful because you can't negate anything. What you can do with it, however, is attach it off of Ryzeal's Detonator. That way, when you detach it off Detonator, you can get the negate, or when Detonator dies, you get the negate. But how about instead of the negate, you get Eclipse Twins? So now when the Detonator dies, you revive the Detonator again, and then because it's a new turn, you get the effect to attach on summon again, meaning you get up to 5 pops with your Ryzeal Detonator. That like machine gun popping is pretty good. Even if your deck is good into destruction like Fire King or Unchained, that is still more pops than you can likely handle. It also means that on backswing and follow-up turns, Ext Ryzeal can generate insurmountable amounts of follow-up that most decks just cannot cope against. So knowing that this card is not legal but may come out is something to look out for as you plan against Ryzeal, but also as you keep an eye out for how the metagame may shift in the upcoming months. The last card to talk about that isn't out yet is Valence. This card just came out on the TCG. When it goes to graveyard, it does target any set card on the field and destroy it. So what it means is Ext can truly dominate counter traps like Judgment, Solemn Warning, or Strike, before you may decide to hold them for the Ryzeal XYZ. Now, if you don't use it immediately, then you could just get popped up. But again, Eclipse Twins and Valen are not out in Master Duel, so you do not need to play around them, but keep an eye out for when they come out in the future. It's important that Ext Ryzeal here and this sort of broken effect isn't restricted to Ryzeal, and I would recommend trying this out. For example, people have seen success with playing Ryzeal Ext and a small 1-sword package or something in Voiceless Voice. Ext is such an overbearing card that if you're not super extra deck centric, or you're fine with rank 4s, then trying to fit this into your strategy may be a good idea. That's just one talking point to the deck down. What are the next 2 big spots to pay attention to? One of those is Ryzeal Duo Drive. Ryzeal Duo Drive is this deck's biggest way to accrue advantage. If you have hand traps versus the deck, you usually want to try and stop Duo Drive, as that gives you 2 new cards. Now, it's important to note that in the TCG, for the majority of Ryzeals dominating the metagame, Star Ryzeal was not legal, and this does impact a couple things, because without Star Ryzeal in the metagame, Duo Drive is the only card in the deck that can search spells or traps. So accessing your powerful field spell like Cross is not possible if you save your interactions for Ryzeal Duo Drive. So when you're trying to prevent certain things from happening, like Ryzeal Cross, you say, I don't want effect negation to exist, then if you can target down both Star and Duo, then you can guarantee that the deck, unless they drew it naturally, won't have access to their Cross. This also shuts down their ability to extend some time, as well as their follow-up, because oftentimes just throwing cards like Effect Veiler, Impermanence, and Ash Blossom on the first card they play isn't really worthwhile. But with the legality of Star in the metagame, it does make it a bit more kind of fluky. For example, if we were to play without Star, let me propose a scenario. Say I special summon Ext Ryzeal, and my hand is Infinite Impermanence. If I use the Infinite Impermanence, then they can special summon Sword, Search. Even if I had a second Infinite Impermanence there, they can then overload those 2 into Duo, and I'd be kind of screwed. However, if you just held your Infinite Impermanence for the Duo Drive, there'd be no way for them to really force it through, And even if they got a bunch of searches, it would just still result in Detonator, which you'd of course still have to be prepared to beat, but at least it's not the cross and infinite follow-up that Duo would provide. But with Star Ryzeal, if you have just the one impermanence and you imperm Duo Drive, it's fairly likely that they can still access cross via Star. However, again, if you have those two impermanences, now you actually can cut them off of cross because you can save those imperms for those respective cards. Regardless though, knowing what you're looking to prevent and beat in the Ryzeal strategy is important for you deciding how to use your hand traps, because in truth, it won't be the same every game. Just knowing the capabilities of the opponent and what you're trying to avoid is going to be the most important. But lastly, on the topic of Ryzeal Duo Drive, it does operate like Gigantic Sprite. What that means is it doesn't detach materials for cost, as well as detach materials from any of your XYZs. So if you have removal cards like Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit, or Nibiru the Primal Being, and it's live, you can essentially negate the effect by chaining and removing the Duo Drive from the field. It also is important to remember in this respect, if your opponent has any other XYZs on the field, they can still detach materials from that XYZ, and the effect will still resolve. This may come up for some combos as you talk about playing Ryzeal. And the last big card to talk about, or choke point to pay attention to, is the card that defines Ryzeal, and Ryzeal Detonator. A card that has been talked about a little bit as a pseudo floodgate and a kind of problem for the game, where it acts almost like Ryzeal, a Riseheart. No, Kashtira, a Riseheart. That's what people call it, Ryzeal, a Riseheart. And the reason is, instead of banishing cards from play, it essentially says anything on the field is not safe and will never stick, because with two materials and attaching the third, you pop 3 cards. Almost no deck is safe from that regard. 3 pops is a lot, even for decks with graveyard effects. And it makes it almost impossible to stick things onto the field. It importantly also makes any continuous effects, like Primate Lordly Load or Pendulum cards, even worse than they may normally be into a field, because not only are they destroyed, they get negated or destroyed and resolved without effects. So in a Ryzeal-based metagame, reliance on these type of continuous cards is typically pretty poor, and you should try avoid decks and tech cards that incorporate that sort of synergy or element. Detonator obviously also has the destruction-based effect, so removal isn't that impactful if it's destruction-based. So cards like Regeki and Dark Hole are not going to be good solutions for Detonator. But I would like to remind you guys that this destruction protection is limited to once per turn, so if you can combo together multiple destruction effects, that will work. This is specifically important for Ryzeal mirror matches when detonators are facing off against each other, because if they use Detonator, you chain your Detonator to pop theirs, and this kind of trades a little bit, you can force a crash where they can no longer protect themselves. But other important ways of dealing with Detonator can involve negation or non-destruction forms of removal. Now, it's important to note that if you're destroying your opponent's Ryzeal Detonator and putting it into the graveyard or banished, it does open up the option for Ryzeal Plugin, a card searchable off of Star and Duo, and fairly common in most pure Ryzeal decks. It'll bring back the Detonator and then give it a material off of Plugin's effect and a material off Detonator's effect, meaning that despite dealing with one Detonator, 2 more materials and 2 more pops will still appear. So for that reason, removal that your opponent can chain to isn't that good, because even if I activate, say, Book of Eclipse, you can chain Detonator to pop itself, and then 2 more effects will still arise. For that reason, non-chainable cards like Ultimate Slayer, Forbidden Droplet, Metaltronus are the cream of the crop. Ultimate Slayer is the go-to form of removal in Ryzeal format. But without Eclipse Twins, this card is a lot lower value in mirror matches, but is still a good card. And it's one of the few cards that can deal with the Detonator, but then also deal with other cards afterwards. This is important because oftentimes the board may consist of Detonator, Duo Drive with material, and a Ryzeal Cross. So getting rid of the Detonator and then sending Aggregator to negate the Cross deals with the majority of the field at once. Slayer is of course not the most flexible card and not good going first. It's hard to know if this card will be a necessity in Master Duel, but as far as the TCG goes, it was a card that was in most players' side decks. And throughout Ryzeal's domination, this card was consistently a card that I played 3 of in my side. Another important thing with Detonator, however, is that it has 3,000 attack points. What this means is if you're able to summon a Typhon, they cannot chain that Detonator. So a common theme in very hand trap heavy decks is Typhon becomes mandatory, and these become winnable games. You hand trap your opponent down enough where they're still able to summon Detonator, but if you're able to cut off their follow-up by stopping Duo Drive and such from resolving, then you can normal summon a hand trap, make Typhon, bounce the Detonator, and you're honestly fine. I've won many games like this, and if you watch my match against Sam, my Dark Magician deck versus his Ryzeal deck, and my hand traps were able to slow him down enough to the point that my Typhon was able to bring the game back into my court, and then from there the Dark Magician cards won. But Typhon is going to be an absolute necessity. It's not just a insta-lose card like people think it is. It's actually going to be a relevant part in this format. Other important things to look out for as you're trying to deal with Detonator is SP Little Knight. One of the biggest problems with many monster forms of dealing with Detonator, like Fenrir or even the Typhon, is that they simply lose to effect negation like Effect Veiler and Infinite Impermanence. SP is the exception, where it can beat those cards pretty easily. Because when you summon SP and target Detonator, if they chain Imperm, you can chain SP second effect to deal with the Detonator for the turn. If they then, in response, try and negate that effect by destroying its target, the SP, well then the SP dodges the Imperm and the Veiler and still resolves on the first effect to banish Detonator. Another big monster out to Ryzeal Detonator is going to be Chaos Angel, especially in Fiendsmith strategies. A common play pattern might be activate Fiendsmith Engraver, get tracked for Lurry, make Requiem. Then, instead of using Requiem, you're going to use Engraver's effect to shuffle back the Lurry. Now, if the opponent chains Detonator, targeting the Requiem, you just chain the Requiem. Of course, if your opponent doesn't respond, you will chain Requiem anyways. From there, you can special summon from the deck Engraver or Lacrima, and for this case, we're going to summon Lacrima. No Lacrima effect on summon because we don't want them to give them the chance to pop and remove us, because again, Detonator not being a proactive card does matter in these circumstances. From there, you can synchro summon for Chaos Angel. Now, Chaos Angel with light monsters cannot be affected by opponent's monster effects, so they can't even chain Detonator to pop it. This does lose to Impermanence, but it gets you cards in the grave for future Fiendsmith plays and threatens immediately the Detonator. Now, the thing with both of these monster-centric plays is they do lose to Ryzeal Cross. So this is where preventing Ryzeal Cross is really important, and why most game plans cannot just rely on SP or Chaos Angel to win the game. You have to prevent the duo drive and star from resolving first, or bait up the cross first, and then you can kind of build your game plan around that. That's why spell cards are typically the easier answer. Now, I did say with the Fiendsmith line, instead of Lacrima, you can summon Engraver there. Now, the reason is that there is one rank 6 that's actually absolutely incredible versus Ryzeal, and that is Goblin Crazy Beast. A generic rank 6, which can quick effects target a spell trap on the field, and then attach 2 materials from anywhere on the field, which includes your opponent's monsters, and attach the spell trap you targeted to this card as material. That just eats up the Detonator's material. It's the Goblin cards are crazy versus Ryzeal, important to pay attention to. Furthermore, Goblin Crazy Beast has a protection effect, the same as Detonator, to detach and protect. And then lastly, Crazy Beast can summon itself from the grave once per duel for free. So it gives you link fodder, and it gives you a constant way of just forcing out all of the potential that Detonator has. Because it has a protection effect as well, it also sets up Zeus plays. So say you're playing a Bestial heavy deck and you summon 2 Bestials before Detonator hits the field. If the opponent goes cross pass there, you can make Crazy Beast, force the cross with the effect to suck up, crash, and then make Zeus, and that deals with everything. Yes, Detonator will still kill the Zeus, but who cares? Game should still be over. Speaking of Bestials, Bestial Druid Swarm is a decent way of dealing with Ryzeal because it does kill the Detonator in a non-destruction fashion. It, however, is still weak to cross and plug-in, so I wouldn't recommend relying on it too much. That being said, the ability to banish from the grave can be impactful against Ryzeal, especially if they are playing a Fiendsmith variant. And that should give you a good idea of the 3 biggest attack points in Ryzeal, but Ryzeal is not without counterplay. So I want to talk about a couple of their other options in Ryzeal to maybe expect and build plans around, or use if you haven't already. If you're worried about targeting effects like Metaltronus and Ultimate Slayer as far as breakers, as well as some hand traps, then Star Liege Photon Blast Dragon is a fantastic choice. It does require a little bit extra in terms of extension or body commitment, but usually it's pretty easy to make. And you can play extra rank 4 engines like Servicing Big Jaws if you really want to make it easier. Star Liege says, and ignore the first part, your monsters of 2000 or more attack cannot be targeted by your opponents by card effects or destroyed by your opponent's card effects. What this means is you put this alongside Ryzeal Duo Drive, and Star Liege goes to 2000 because Duo Drive bumps all your monsters, and then you cannot Imperm, you can't Veiler it, you can't Ultimate Slayer, you can't Metaltronus. And then your Detonator and Duo Drive will also be protected, so it can be really hard to deal with your opponent's cards this way. And it makes Slayer and Metaltronus a little iffy. The downside with Photon Dragon is other breakers like Eclipse and Droplet can work. As well as oftentimes in order to do this, you have to, if you want your Duo Drive to be protected, summon 5 monsters before Cross is live. Thus Nibiru can be live. Whereas in typical lines, Nibiru is pretty ineffective unless you can stop the Cross. Another big option for this deck is other rank 4s to end on that give you other sorts of attack plans. Because once people start planning for ways to beat Detonator and Cross, if there's something else alongside it that can render those plans still useless. For one, Bagooska still exists, another powerful floodgate, where if your game plan is Chaos Angel, this will just stop it. This makes decks like Goblin worse, because even if you can detach materials, the Goblin monsters will still struggle under the Bagooska. Alternatively, you can summon rank 4s that search cards. Gallant Granite is a common one because it's searching the Nibiru. And then lastly, a newer option in the TCG is Infernal Flame Banshee. And while this adds any Pyro, you can add Ryzeal cards. What you're looking to add in a lot of cases is Nemesis Flag, which in most games may have to just normal summon. There may not be a banished card if you just summon it. The point is you can grab Eschatos or Protos and then lock out your opponent from a type or attribute, usually Dark against Malice, which can be pretty game ending. Then lastly, there's the option for Ryzeal to play Fiendsmith cards, because Ice Ryzeal specifically doesn't lock you into rank 4s or level 4s when you use its normal summon effect. So you're able to go through some pretty powerful Fiendsmith plays before going into your Ryzeal plays. And Fiendsmith cards via double Lacrima or Lacrima plus a level 4 like Mulch Army can convert into Duo Drive and therefore your Ryzeal plays. What the Fiendsmith cards do is they give you extra sort of disruption and follow-up to mitigate the impact of powerful spells. And that's the point of a lot of these cards. So the point is that Ryzeal is adaptable. And while things may change, what we saw in the TCG is that the metagame would evolve in a sort of triangle fashion where hybrid formats of Ryzeal were good and then pure formats were good because people's tech cards and builds would adapt to beat what's currently played and you'd have to move on to the next thing. And it will likely be the same in Master Duel. So you must be keen on all the possibilities that Ryzeal has, which ones are common and prepare for those, as well as if you're playing Ryzeal, try being the step ahead and playing one of your different sort of offshoots of Ryzeal that is most well equipped to deal with the current metagame. And all right, that should be a pretty comprehensive guide on how to play and play against Ryzeal. But just make sure you know what key things to look out for in your games, whether it be Ext, Detonator, Cross, or Duo Drive, and build your game plan accordingly to deal with all of these things. Let me know if you guys enjoyed this video and if I should do those for any future big meta shifts within Master Duel. I'm also curious to see if you guys thought I missed anything super important in regards to the deck, or if you feel like I was wrong in any of the points. As well as please like, subscribe, it does support the channel, and comment down below just you had a good time, and I'll see you guys all next time. Have a good one.